Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome back to the DEX Show. Flying solo once again today. Tim Flower will be back with us shortly, but I'm extremely excited to welcome today's guest. He's one of my favorite writers in the space. Without exaggeration, he's John Hagel, well-known Silicon Valley legend, entrepreneur, strategist, former Deloitte partner, and author of The Journey Beyond Fear. John, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to the conversation.
As am I. Particularly, I'm particularly keen to sort of hone in on what you've written around digital transformation, John. I think you bring something quite novel to that conversation, and we'll dig into that in some detail momentarily. But first of all, if anyone doesn't know your work already, listening out there, give us a quick introduction. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your career.
Wow. Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I've been in Silicon Valley now for over 40 years, so a long journey. Founder of 2 tech startups, a senior executive with Atari, for those who can remember that far back, and a partner with McKinsey and Company. I helped open their e-commerce practice back in the early 1990s. And then was a partner with Deloitte, where I founded and led a global research center called the Center for the Edge. I retired from that about 4 years ago and have been doing consulting to large leaders of large organizations around the world throughout my career. And my focus has been on looking at emerging opportunities in the future and helping leaders to see those opportunities and motivating them to address them and to pursue the transformation that would be required to address the opportunities. But over time, I've become more and more focused on emotions because I've found that there's been a significant barrier to addressing opportunities emerging, and that's the emotion of fear. As you mentioned, my most recent book is The Journey Beyond Fear, but I've actually written 8 books now, so it's a long career in terms of writing books as well.
It is indeed. And looking back across those 40 years, John, I mean, are you tempted sometimes to think it's been 40 years of perpetual digital transformation, perhaps for want of a better term, when we think about those earlier decades somewhat? But
Yeah, the digital transformation has become kind of a buzzword in the business world. And I say that in my experience, if I go to any large organization around the world, they have a digital transformation program. But when I probe into what do they mean, what is that program, what is it doing, it's basically applying digital technology to help everyone do what they've always done, faster and cheaper. And my pushback on that is when we talk about transformation, I like to use the metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly. If there's not a fundamental change in everything we do, it is not transformation. If we're just making the caterpillar walk faster, that's helpful to the caterpillar, but please do not call it transformation.
but across those 40 years, we've seen categorical transformation, right? But I guess you've also seen people outpaced by that process of transformation. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I think, again, it's a question of large organizations and the degree to which they've changed. And frankly, I don't think they've changed nearly enough, and there's a lot more ahead. So,
Yeah, thinking about what's ahead, I mean, we're hearing the sort of phrase AI-driven transformation in circulation presently. I mean, do you look at that as a process that's potentially qualitatively different in its scale or potential impact to the previous waves you've already lived through and seen firsthand?
well, I think the challenge, and I'm certainly accept that artificial intelligence is a transformative technology, but I believe what's happening is a convergence of multiple technologies, not just artificial intelligence. We've got the Internet of Things, we've got biotechnology, we've got quantum computing, we've got a whole range of technologies that are intersecting and amplifying the impact of each of the individual technologies. So if we just get focused on one, we're never going to see what the magnitude of the change is.
And you've alluded to this distinction already, I think, between digital transformation and what you call business transformation. Maybe flesh out that distinction a bit more and give some real world examples of maybe successful business transformation, please.
Well, it's fundamentally, I've done research on the long-term trends that are reshaping our global economy. And I've come to believe that there is what I call a big shift in institutional models that are going to drive our large organizations around the world, not just businesses, but governments, universities, nonprofits. The institutional model that has driven the large organizations today is what I call scalable efficiency. It's basically the key to success is to do things faster and cheaper at scale. And it's hard to argue with that because I believe for over a century, that has led to the growth and success of large organizations around the world.
Mm.
But in a world of rapid change, scalable efficiency is becoming less and less efficient. And I think the need is to shift to a different model, which I describe as scalable learning. And here, again, I have to be a bit careful because when I talk about learning, most executives say, oh, yes, we do learning. We have training programs. We have everybody learn in training programs. No, I'm talking about a different form of learning, which is learning in the form of creating entirely new knowledge that never existed before. Training programs just have to do with sharing existing knowledge. Great. You learned a skill that everybody had, that other people had already. Great. Learning in the form of creating new knowledge does not occur in a training room. It occurs in the work environment as you're confronting new situations that have never been confronted before and finding ways to create value in those situations. That's a very different form of learning, and I believe everyone in the organization needs to master that scalable learning, not just people in the research departments or product development, but every part of the organization, janitors in buildings, everyone has to be focused on this form of learning.
How can an organization facilitate that, what sounds like a shift in mentality more than as much as a shift in practice?
Well, it's challenging. Again, I think it is a fundamental change, and it starts at the top. I mean, um, leaders today, the mark of a strong leader in organizations is someone who has an answer to all the questions. No matter what the question, you can count on the leader to have an answer. But hey, in a rapidly changing world, this is why trust is eroding in all large institutions. If you have a leader who says they have an answer to all the questions, there are two possibilities. Either they don't understand how rapidly the world is changing, or they're lying. In either case, they're not to be trusted. The mark of a strong leader in the scalable learning world is a leader who has the most powerful and inspiring questions and will freely acknowledge they don't have an answer to the questions and ask for help. And it sets in motion a totally different culture in organizations, which is questions are not only okay, they're absolutely essential. And asking for help is not only okay, it's absolutely essential. You need help. You need to come together to address the questions that are emerging on a daily basis.
I mean, it sounds like what you're discussing has as many implications for the way education should function in society as for the way businesses should be run. And I was wondering, based on that assumption, how does that break down in real terms? I mean, how do you think schools should be addressing this issue? How do you think colleges and universities should be asking these same questions of their students?
No, it's a great observation. I've done a lot of study, at least in the US, of the emergence of the public school system. And the public school system was designed to prepare students for the work environment of scalable efficiency. Just listen to the teacher, memorize what the teacher has to say, and show you that you memorized it in the exams. I believe education is going to have to fundamentally transform if we're really focused on this new form of learning. And in this case, again, I go back to emotions. I've come to believe that one of the keys to success in a rapidly changing world is a specific form of passion. I call it the passion of the explorer. And I believe that all schools are going to have to be redesigned to help students discover their passion. What is the passion that really excites them to have more and more impact in a specific domain and help them then to pursue it and cultivate that passion and learn faster in whatever domain is most exciting for them. So it's a very different form of education.
Very different. And is it realizable? Like, do you think it's an achievable aim? Perhaps when you think about an organization, right, you have a relatively small scale. It might be thousands of people, but still compared to the millions of people that pass for education, the kind of, centralized way that an education system has to inevitably be run. How realistic is this aspiration towards something that sounds so novel?
Well, I actually don't believe that education has to be centralized. It is
Sure.
centralized today.
Sure.
It can be highly decentralized.
It could.
And in fact, what we're seeing today is the emergence of homeschooling, unschooling, new
Yes, indeed.
schools of all kinds, because parents are increasingly realizing that these centralized schools are not really helping their children. So I think it's going to be something that will emerge over time because of
Did,
the
did,
need.
did you say, John, did you say unschooling?
Yes.
I never heard of this. Is that literally when they try and de-school you? What is this?
Well, it's this notion that schools are as they're currently designed are focused on just getting students to be, you know, following instructions, and unschooling is the notion, no, let's free our students from our children from these schools and let's just let them explore the world.
I was going to say unschooling sounds precisely what you're advocating for on a sort of societal level, I would argue. But I mean, let's think specifically about the workplace context. And let's think about the employee, the ideal employee, in a little bit more detail. Um, what kind of attributes would you be looking for? I mean, you've described it to some degree, but is it so open-ended? Is it so much about that openness to learn, that openness to experiment that you can't even put a fine point on it? Or are there certain attributes and outlooks which can be inculcated and encouraged and to a degree nurtured?
No, well, again, I think the key to success in the future for large organizations and for the employees is to focus on the passion of the explorer. One of the interesting things that I've discovered in my research is I've yet to find a single large organization which measures or seeks to identify the passion of their employees. Nobody is looking at passion. In fact, passion is viewed as deeply suspect. Passionate people ask too many questions. They take too many risks. They deviate from the script. You don't want passionate workers. You want workers who will follow their instructions. So they focus on engaged workers. What's worker engagement? That's what they measure. And again, I don't want to be too contrarian, but um, broadly engaged workers means, do you like the work you do? Do you like the people you work with? Do you respect the company you work for? That's an engaged worker. Okay, let's imagine one of those engaged workers and go to them and tell them that their work is going to have to fundamentally change. Whoa, wait a minute. I like the work that I do. I don't want to change. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I love it. I like it. So I think engagement is a challenge in a rapidly changing world, and passion is somebody who's excited about change. They want more change. They're seeking change all the time. So that's the key, is how do we cultivate that passion? And I I could go on a long time, but the one of the shifts that I see is again, when we talk about learning, it's about learning new skills. And again, semantics matter. Skills, in my view, are things that are valuable in a specific context. So, a skill on how to operate a machine, that's very valuable when you're in front of that machine. Skill to do a certain kind of calculation in a process, that's valuable in that process. But they're not valuable anywhere else.
Mhm.
To me, the key is to shift our focus from skills to what I call capabilities. Things like curiosity, imagination, creativity, collaboration, reflection. Those are capabilities that are valuable in every context and essential if you're really focused on learning in the form of creating new knowledge. So, how do we cultivate those capabilities and draw those out in people?
Yeah, as I said at the top. Oh, sorry, John. Go.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one other thing. I get a lot of pushback from people saying, "Oh, come on, John, some of us are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and have the security of an income." And, my response to that is, okay, let's go to a playground and let's look at children 5 or 6 years old. Show me one that isn't really excited about exploring new areas and coming together with others to explore those areas. What happened? They went to school and they were taught to just listen to the teacher and they lost that passion, but it's in there. It's still there, I believe, in all humans, waiting to be found and drawn out. So that's the opportunity that I see.
It's interesting because your addendum there, it touched upon precisely what I was going to ask you about, which is, as I say, I genuinely enjoy your writing and your ideas. And but one of the things I often find myself quite forcefully thinking as a kind of counterpoint to them is like, you're kind of describing in your ideal employee depiction or your depiction of the employee of the future, you're describing what I would think of as an ideal founder, as an ideal entrepreneur. And I think that there's a lot of logic to the idea that we all need to become entrepreneurs, to some degree in the modern economy. But this is what you've just touched upon, right? That dynamic between people who do seek more passivity, more regularity. We've always defined the entrepreneur as the person within capitalism willing to take the risk, right? And it's that willingness which we acknowledge societally is a kind of is a rarity, you know, and is the thing that in its rarity is becomes well rewarded because it has a general utility, a general broader utility. And I guess you've already touched upon it by sort of, unearthing that passion that everybody has, maybe in many cases more smothered in the kind of concept of unschooling. But yeah, I wonder if is there, I mean, is not everybody's going to be able to achieve this. And what is the place for people who don't have that autonomy within themselves in the future economy?
Well, again, I would push back and say we are all capable of it, and we all have an aspiration and need for it. It's within us, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be cultivated and pursued. And we need to create environments that will encourage people to find their passion, what really excites them, what is it that really drives their desire to have more change and more impact in the world, and help them to pursue it. And so I believe that we all have it. Just again, we're in environments that crush that passion, that are hostile to it. And it's not surprising. I did a survey of the U.S. workforce, and in the U.S. workforce, the survey indicated that at most 14% of U.S. workers have passion about the work they're doing. 14%. And I'm actually surprised it's as much as 14%, because in environments that are hostile to this passion, they've somehow found ways to pursue it and, maintain it. And so I believe, again, we're going to need to find ways to make it 100% of people who have passion and are pursuing their passion.
It's a compelling proposition, John. Can't deny it. Let's look at sort of macro trends a little bit. What the specter of global competition is presumably driving the urgency around this need for kind of unleashing the workforce effectively, I think, as you describe it. What would you say about that backdrop and about the exigency of tapping this passion in terms of the future of a global economy and the future of, for instance, America or the West?
Yeah, no, well, it's essential. And I think, again, I've done a lot of research on what I call the big shift, the forces that are changing the global economy and society. And on one side, the big shift is creating mounting performance pressure. It is intensifying competition on a global scale. It's accelerating the pace of change. So things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And then because of all the connectivity we've created around the world, we have extreme disruptive events that come in out of nowhere and disrupt our best laid plans and actions. So there's a lot of pressure. Any one of those things would be pressure, but three together. And I think it's the reason why we're seeing around the world the increasing emotion of fear, because it's a response to that pressure. But here's an interesting paradox, and I love paradox. The same forces in this big shift on the global economy that are creating mounting performance pressure are also creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have been imaginable a few decades ago. But if we're driven by fear, we can't even see those opportunities, much less be motivated to pursue them. So it's one of the reasons I've become more and more focused on how do we acknowledge and address the emotion of fear and help people to move beyond the fear and find their passion and pursue it.
I mean, it's particularly pointed at the moment with the fear of AI replacement, effectively, right, of jobs. You know? And I suppose, I mean, when you look at coverage of it, when you look at the way it's communicated and discussed, do you see just the proliferation of fear as opposed to the proliferation of opportunity? And how much opportunity do you see at this present moment for people who are willing to push past that kind of nervousness and hesitation?
No, I believe it's huge opportunity for people, but I understand the fear. When I talk to executives about artificial intelligence, they only have two questions. How quickly can I automate? And how many jobs can I eliminate?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
That's scalable efficiency.
There it is.
And the employees, even if the leaders don't say those out loud in the speeches, they know that's what's driving most of the leaders of large organizations around the world. So again, the fear is very understandable. But I think again, it just drives the notion of, okay, what can I do to um, continue to work and create value in a rapidly changing world? And that's about finding passion and pursuing it.
Any thoughts on the sort of the paradox which that mentality that you just described among executives presents for the economic system potentially, right? I mean, putting aside you are offering solutions, you know, potential solutions. I see that, but when you think about this notion of okay, you can replace the workers with technology, you can have more scalable efficiency in organizations, but guess what? You're also going to be collectively damaging your own customer base as an economy, right? There's an irony, or as you say, a paradox to that. And I was wondering what your reflections are on the realness of that threat to the way the system functions, as you know, having consumers and workers and a circularity in the economy itself.
Yeah, again, the challenge is scalable efficiency is becoming less and less efficient over time because in a rapidly changing world, you can't just focus on doing the tasks you've always done faster and cheaper. You have to fundamentally change those tasks and address the opportunities that are emerging. So I think it's something that is going to happen, and I'm an optimist, and I believe it will happen as more and more people realize that what's required in this world is not efficiency, scalable efficiency in the traditional model, but this notion of learning in the form of creating new knowledge and pursuing it. So I think we're going to see it happen, but it's not going to be easy.
Are you familiar with it's something we discussed a lot on the show the last few months? This the theme of digital adoption. You know, of facilitating the adoption of new technologies among employees. Kind of, you could say it's a form of training, which is you know one of those things that you kind of you know scowl at a little bit in your work. But you could also say that look, these are the tools that currently we're trying to encourage adoption to are very open-ended tools, right? They're tools that can expand or contract according to your imagination. That's the nature of these AI tools, arguably. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on digital adoption per se, and on adapting to these tools specifically.
Again, I'm a bit of a contrarian. When I hear digital adoption, it's the message from the leaders is adopt these tools, use these tools to do what you've always done faster and cheaper.
Mhm.
It's not adopt the tools so you can fundamentally reimagine what the work is and what value you can create and deliver to the stakeholders that you have. I have to tell you one little example or story that gives me some inspiration is there's a clinical laboratory company that was experiencing increasing customer churn rates in their marketplace, and finding that the frustration of customers was with their call center operations, and the call center operators were resigning at an accelerating rate because they were frustrated. The leader of the call center went to the department, called all the people together, and said, "Here's one thing I'm promising: none of you are going to lose your jobs. You will all continue to work. But your first assignment is go work with the IT department to find out how you can take IT and automate the most routine calls that you get that are consuming all your time and attention. And then once you've freed up that time that's been consumed with the routine calls, focus on the calls that you've never had before and that have no answers for, and come together in small groups," he called them pods, "to problem solve and figure out how you could address those problems and come up with creative answers." Customer churn rates went way down. The call center operators became much more passionate and excited because they were making a difference that nobody else could have made, because they were coming up with solutions and answers that nobody had ever had before. So I think it's an interesting example of a way to adopt the technology, but in the process of fundamentally changing how you operate and preserving work, not just firing people, but keeping the people focused on more and more change around you and the problems and opportunities that need to be addressed.
That's fascinating. And it anticipates the next question as well, which is, the traditional silos of the modern corporation, the traditional departments, the phenomenon of departments per se. Presumably, one of the ones we discussed, for instance, is the old silo between IT and HR. As the workplace becomes increasingly digitized, who owns what? I mean, that's a very real question at the moment. When you look at the structure of the future organization, what structure, if any, do you anticipate?
Well, I believe the silos are going to have to be blown up and disappear. So, the key to me, again, I've done a lot of research and work on if you really believe in the need for learning in the form of creating new knowledge, how do you organize to pursue that? And in my experience, the most effective way of learning for those people is coming together into small groups. And it's typically anywhere between 3 to 15 people who share a real passion for and excitement about having more and more impact in a certain area. I call them impact groups. And they're diverse people within the group. It's not just people all from one department or one, educational system, whatever. They're very diverse people because they realize that they're going to learn faster if there are diverse perspectives that are being brought together into the small group. And on the one side, they're constantly supporting each other in a challenging time. But on the other side, they're constantly challenging each other to say, why can't we have even more impact? What would we need to do? How would we learn to have more impact? And because they're driven by this passion, this excitement about having more impact. And so the core unit, I believe, of large organizations in the future will be a small group of 3 to 15 people, and they'll be connected into networks that will connect them with other small groups, both within the organization and outside the organization. I think increasingly this notion of silos is going to have to be dismantled, and we focus on networks that bring people together across organizations so they can learn faster.
Brilliantly said, John, and a fantastic note to conclude on. I think, but it's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you for the first time. As I say, I've been reading you for a long time. Really enjoy your work, and we'll continue to keep a close eye on it. Anything you would like to tell the listeners about where they can find you, read you, connect with you?
Yeah, no, well, it's I have a website, johnhagel.com, and would welcome any feedback on what I've said. And I do a lot of activity on social media. I'm active on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, X now. And as I mentioned, I've written quite a few books. And I would encourage people, particularly today in a world of increasing fear, to look at my most recent book, The Journey Beyond Fear, and I would welcome feedback on that. Does it really address the need, and what could I do to make the concepts even more effective and compelling to people?
John Hagel, thank you so much. We will, of course, put those links in the show notes. Hope to have you on the show again in the future. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.